What would you do if the person you trusted most chose to save someone else while you were drowning tonight? I'm sharing the true story of Sophia Martinez Blackwood, a successful influencer who thought she had the perfect marriage. But on one yacht party night, when both she and her husband's mistress fell into the Pacific Ocean, she discovered just how little her life was worth. This isn't just about betrayal. It's about a woman who lost everything, including her unborn child, and exposed a deadly conspiracy that shocked the nation. If you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship, this will hit you like a wave. Hit like and subscribe, because this story will change how you see love, loyalty, and your own hidden strength. Sophia Martinez Blackwood adjusted her ring light one more time, checking her reflection in the phone screen. 2.3 million followers waited for her daily update, and today's announcement would change everything. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Malibu mansion, casting a golden glow across her carefully curated life. "Good morning, beautiful souls," she whispered into the camera, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "I have some incredible news to share with you today." The comments started flooding in immediately. Heart emojis, fire symbols, and endless variations of "We love you, Sophia" filled the screen. She had built this empire from nothing, transforming from a small-town girl from Phoenix into one of the most influential lifestyle bloggers in America. Her brand, Authentic Living with Sophia, had partnerships with major companies and a book deal worth 7 figures. "Derek and I are expecting our first baby," she announced, her voice trembling with genuine emotion. The notification sounds exploded like fireworks as likes poured in by the thousands. But Derek wasn't there to share the moment. Her husband of 3 years was already gone, claiming an early meeting at Connect Core, his social media startup that had recently reached unicorn status. The empty coffee cup on his side of the kitchen island was the only evidence he had been home at all. Sophia ended the live stream and checked the numbers. 500,000 views in 10 minutes. The algorithm loved pregnancy announcements, especially from influencers with her reach. Brand partnerships would flood in soon, baby companies desperate to align with her authentic motherhood journey. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amanda, her best friend and lawyer. "Girl, I saw the announcement. Are you sure about this timing? We still haven't heard back from Derek about the new business structure you requested." Amanda was right to be cautious. For months, Sophia had been requesting more transparency about their shared finances. Derek controlled everything through various LLCs and investment accounts. When she asked to be added as a signatory, he always had an excuse. The lawyers were busy. The paperwork was complicated. The timing wasn't right. Another text popped up, this one from an unknown number. "Congrats on the pregnancy announcement. Derek must be thrilled. By the way, this is Madison Sterling, his new brand consultant. We should meet soon." Sophia stared at the message. Derek had mentioned hiring a consultant to help Connect Core expand into lifestyle branding, but he had been vague about the details. The woman's profile picture showed a stunning blonde in her early 20s, all sharp cheekbones and glossy lips. She forwarded the text to Amanda with a single word, "Thoughts." The response came immediately. "Red Flag City. I'm running a background check." Derek's car pulled into the driveway, the low rumble of his Tesla interrupting her spiraling thoughts. She watched through the window as he sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing animatedly. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders. When he finally walked through the front door, his smile seemed forced. "Hey babe, sorry I missed the morning routine. How did the announcement go?" 2 million views and counting, she said, studying his face. "Madison Sterling texted me." Something flickered across his expression, gone so quickly she almost missed it. Oh, Madison. Yeah, she's helping us pivot into the lifestyle space. I mentioned you, obviously. She probably wants to discuss collaboration opportunities. You didn't tell me you hired someone? Derek loosened his tie, avoiding her eyes. It happened fast. She came highly recommended, and we needed someone who understands your world, the influencer ecosystem, brand partnerships, that whole space. Sophia felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. In 3 years of marriage, she had learned to recognize Derek's tells. The way he spoke faster when he was being evasive, how he found tasks to occupy his hands when uncomfortable, the slight defensiveness that crept into his voice. That evening, Derek came home with flowers and dinner from Sophia's favorite restaurant. He was attentive, affectionate, asking about her doctor's appointment and discussing nursery designs. For a moment, she let herself believe the folder on Amanda's desk was wrong. But when he excused himself to take a call, she noticed he walked to the far side of the house, his voice dropping to a whisper. Through the baby monitor app on her phone, she could hear fragments of conversation from their bedroom. I know the timing isn't ideal, but we need to be careful. Yes. She suspects something. The yacht party will be perfect. Sophia closed her eyes. One hand pressed to her stomach where their child was growing. The life she had built, the marriage she had believed in, the future she had planned. Everything was crumbling in real time. But she was Sophia Martinez Blackwood, and she had built an empire once before. She would not go down without a fight. The Rolex was sitting in Madison Sterling's purse like a smoking gun. Sophia stared at the familiar silver watch, the one she had given Derek for their second wedding anniversary. The engraving on the back read, "Time stands still when I'm with you. Forever yours, S." She had saved for 6 months to buy it, back when her influencer income was still unpredictable. Madison's purse had been sitting open on the conference table at ConnectCore's offices. Sophia had come to surprise Derek with lunch, but he was in meetings all afternoon. The receptionist had suggested she wait in the small conference room where Madison had been working. "Oh my God, you found it," Madison's voice rang out behind her, bright and cheerful. Derek was so worried he'd lost that watch. He took it off during our strategy session yesterday and couldn't remember where he'd put it. Sophia turned slowly, still holding the Rolex. Madison Sterling was even more beautiful in person, with the kind of effortless confidence that came from never being told no. She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, and her smile never wavered. Strategy session. Sophia's voice came out steadier than she felt. We were working late on the lifestyle brand integration. Derek is so passionate about expanding ConnectCore's reach into your demographic. He talks about you constantly. Actually, how inspiring you are. How much he admires your business sense. The words should have been reassuring, but they felt like carefully rehearsed lines. Madison moved closer, her hand extended for the watch. "I'll make sure he gets this back safely. I'll give it to him myself," Sophia said, closing her fingers around the metal. "Since it was a gift from me." For just a moment, Madison's perfect mask slipped. Something cold flashed in her eyes before the smile returned. "Of course. You two are so lucky to have each other. And now with the baby coming, it's like a fairy tale." Derek appeared in the doorway, and Sophia watched his face cycle through surprise, confusion, and something that looked like panic. "Sophia, what are you doing here?" She held up the watch. "Returning your property." Madison found it in her purse. The silence stretched for 10 seconds that felt like an hour. Derek's eyes darted between the two women, his mind clearly racing through explanations. I must have taken it off during our brainstorming session, he said finally. We were working on storyboards, and I didn't want to scratch the face. All night, Sophia asked quietly. What? You said you were in emergency meetings until 2 a.m. yesterday. Madison said you had a strategy session. Which was it? Derek's jaw tightened. This was dangerous territory, and they both knew it. In the 3 years they had been together, Sophia had never directly challenged him in front of another person. Both. Madison interjected smoothly. The emergency investor meeting ran long, and then Derek and I worked until dawn on damage control. The lifestyle pivot is crucial right now with all the market uncertainty. Sophia looked at her husband. Is that true? Of course it's true. Why would you even ask that? The shift in his tone was subtle but unmistakable. He was turning this around, making her the unreasonable one. It was a technique she had seen him use in business meetings, redirecting questions to put the other person on defense. Because I'm your wife, and I deserve to know where you spend your nights. I'm building something incredible here, Sophia. Something that will secure our family's future. Your future. Our child's future. His hand moved to her stomach, a gesture that should have been tender but felt possessive. I need you to trust me. That afternoon, while Derek was in back-to-back meetings, Sophia drove to Amanda's law office in Beverly Hills. Her best friend had been her roommate at UCLA, and she was one of the few people who knew Sophia before she became a brand. I found some interesting information about your new friend Madison, Amanda said, sliding a folder across her glass desk. She's not exactly who she appears to be. The background check revealed a pattern. Madison Sterling had worked for 3 different tech companies in the past 2 years, always in vaguely defined consulting roles. Each position had ended abruptly, and in 2 cases, the CEOs had left their wives within 6 months of hiring her. She's a specialist, Amanda said grimly. And not the kind Derek claimed. Sophia's hands shook as she closed the folder. Everything made sense now. Derek's late nights, his sudden interest in wardrobe upgrades, the way he guarded his phone like a state secret. What do I do? Amanda leaned forward. You document everything. Screenshots, recordings, financial records. If this goes where I think it's going, you'll need proof. That evening, Derek came home with Chinese takeout and an elaborate explanation about why he couldn't make it to dinner, supply chain issues, investor concerns, market volatility. He spoke for 15 minutes without pause, his words forming a wall of technical jargon that was impossible to question. But Sophia was no longer listening to what he said. She was watching how he said it, cataloging the tells Amanda had taught her to recognize. The way he avoided eye contact during key details, how his hands moved constantly, adjusting his collar, running through his hair, drumming against the table. When he excused himself to take another call, Sophia slipped into his home office. Derek's laptop was closed, but his desk calendar was open to the current week. Tuesday night showed a single appointment Messiah strategy session, 8 p.m. 8 p.m. Not the emergency investor meeting he had described, and M.S. could only be Madison Sterling. Sophia took a photo of the calendar entry, then returned to the living room before Derek finished his call. When he came back, his expression was troubled. Everything okay? She asked. Just work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. But Sophia was done being protected from the truth. Tomorrow, she would start fighting back. The charity yacht party was supposed to be Sophia's introduction to Derek's professional world, but it felt more like walking into enemy territory. She stood at the bow of the 200-foot vessel, watching the Los Angeles skyline shimmer in the distance. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before them, its surface deceptively calm. Around her, tech entrepreneurs mingled with investors, their conversations a mix of startup jargon and social posturing. "You must be the famous Sophia Martinez Blackwood," a voice said behind her. She turned to find a tall man with kind eyes and a genuine smile. "Tyler Cross, LA Times. I've been following your blog for years." The name was familiar, but she couldn't place why. "Thank you. Are you covering the event?" "Investigating. Actually, there's been some interesting movement in the tech charity space. A lot of money flowing through organizations that don't seem to exist on paper." Before Sophia could ask what he meant, Derek's voice cut through the evening air. "There she is, the woman of the hour." Her husband approached with Madison Sterling at his side, and Sophia felt her stomach clench. Madison looked stunning in a red dress that hugged every curve, her blonde hair catching the golden hour light. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged in this world, while Sophia felt like an outsider in her own marriage. "Madison, I'd like you to officially meet my wife, Sophia." Madison's smile was perfect, practiced. "I've been so excited to meet you. Derek talks about you constantly. And congratulations on the pregnancy announcement. 2 million views is incredible engagement." "Thank you," Sophia managed, studying the woman who might be destroying her marriage. Up close, Madison was even more beautiful, but there was something calculating in her eyes, like she was always running equations in her head. Tyler Cross cleared his throat. "I was just telling Sophia about some interesting financial patterns in tech charities." Derek's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Tyler writes investigative pieces for the Times. Always looking for scandal where there isn't any." "Oh, I don't know about that," Tyler said easily. "Some of these stories write themselves. For instance, did you know that Connect Corps has donated over $2 million to maritime rescue organizations in the past year?" Sophia frowned. "Maritime rescue. It's a tax strategy," Derek said quickly. "Our accountant recommended diversifying our charitable giving." Madison stepped closer to Derek, her hand brushing his arm. "We should probably circulate. Lots of important people here tonight." As they moved away, Tyler handed Sophia his business card. "If you ever want to know more about those maritime donations, give me a call." The evening progressed with painful normalcy. Sophia played her part, smiling for photos and discussing her brand with potential partners. But she was watching Derek and Madison, cataloging every interaction, every glance, every moment when they stood too close together. During dinner, seated at a table with other tech wives, Sophia learned more than she wanted to know about her husband's reputation. "Derek's been working incredibly long hours lately," said Jennifer Kim, whose husband ran a competing startup. "Robert sees the lights on at Connect Corps until all hours." "Must be lucrative projects," another woman added with a knowing look. "I heard he bought Madison Sterling a Tesla last month. Top-tier consultant fees." "I suppose." Sophia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "A Tesla. Brand new Model S, custom color and everything. My husband's in automotive, so he notices these things." The conversation continued around her, but Sophia heard nothing else. A Tesla was a $60,000 gift for a consultant who had been working with Connect Corps for less than 3 months. There was no business justification for that level of expenditure. She excused herself and walked to the yacht's upper deck, needing air and space to think. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been perfect for her Instagram feed. Instead, she felt like she was watching her life dissolve in real time. "Gorgeous evening," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Derek approaching, 2 champagne glasses in his hands. He offered one to her, then seemed to remember she was pregnant. Sorry, habit. Sparkling water for you. They stood in silence, watching the horizon. For a moment, it felt like old times, when they would spend hours talking about their dreams and plans for the future. Are you having an affair? The words came out before she could stop them. Derek's glass paused at his lips. What did you just say? You heard me. He set down his champagne and turned to face her fully. I can't believe you would ask me that, especially here, especially tonight. Then answer the question. Of course I'm not having an affair. I'm working 18-hour days to build something incredible for our family. I come home exhausted. I spend every weekend with you, and this is what I get. Accusations, his voice was rising, and Sophia was acutely aware that other guests were starting to notice. Derek had always been skilled at making her feel unreasonable for asking perfectly valid questions. You bought Madison a Tesla. Derek's jaw tightened. Who told you that? Does it matter? Did you or didn't you? It's a business expense. She needs reliable transportation for client meetings. A $60,000 business expense for a consultant. She's not just a consultant, Sophia. She's helping us pivot into a market worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The lifestyle brand integration could triple Connect Core's valuation. Before Derek could respond, Madison appeared at the top of the stairs, her red dress flowing behind her like she was making a dramatic entrance. Derek, there you are. The investors are asking for you. Something about the Q3 projections. Derek looked between the two women, clearly torn between continuing the confrontation and handling the business crisis. Business won, as Sophia knew it would. We'll finish this conversation at home, he said, but his tone suggested the subject was closed, not postponed. As Derek and Madison walked away together, Sophia noticed how naturally Madison's hand found Derek's lower back, guiding him toward the stairs. It was an intimate gesture, possessive and familiar. Tyler Cross appeared beside her again, materializing like he had been waiting for the right moment. Interesting dynamic, he observed. Sophia didn't trust herself to speak without crying. For what it's worth, Tyler continued. I've seen this story before. Powerful men, younger women, wives who get blamed for asking uncomfortable questions. It never ends well for anyone. What do you mean? Tyler pulled out his phone and showed her a news article from 6 months ago. The headline read, Tech CEO's wife dies in suspicious boating accident. Madison Sterling was consulting for this company too. 3 weeks after the wife's death, she and the CEO got married. Sophia's blood turned to ice. What are you saying? I'm saying you should be very, very careful, and maybe don't go swimming tonight. As if summoned by his words, a commotion erupted from the main deck below. Someone was shouting about champagne, and there was the sound of breaking glass. The party was about to become a nightmare. The champagne bottle exploded against the deck like a gunshot, sending amber liquid and glass shards across the polished wood. The yacht's sudden lurch had sent a waiter stumbling into the bar setup, creating a cascade of destruction that turned the elegant charity event into chaos. Sophia gripped the upper deck railing as the vessel continued to rock. Below her, guests scrambled away from the spreading pool of champagne and broken glass, their evening wear making the situation even more treacherous. Women in heels slipped and struggled to maintain balance, while men in expensive suits cursed and tried to help. Everyone stay calm, Derek's voice boomed from the main deck, taking charge as he always did in crisis situations. It's just rough water, nothing to panic about. But Sophia could see the concern on the captain's face as he emerged from the wheelhouse, barking orders to his crew. The Pacific had been calm when they departed, but storm systems could develop quickly this far from shore. Madison Sterling stood near the bar, her red dress a bright splash of color against the chaos. She was holding her phone up, either taking video of the situation or live streaming to her social media accounts. Even in a crisis, she was thinking about content and engagement. Another wave hit the yacht's starboard side, this one larger than the first. The vessel tilted dramatically, and Sophia watched in horror as Madison lost her footing. The younger woman's heels, designed for Instagram photos rather than boat safety, slipped on the wet deck. Time seemed to slow as Madison pinwheeled her arms, desperately trying to regain balance. Her phone flew from her hand, clattering across the deck toward the railing. She lunged after it, and that was her fatal mistake. The yacht pitched again just as Madison reached for her device. Her momentum carried her forward, and suddenly she was tumbling over the side railing into the dark Pacific waters below. Her scream cut through the night air like a knife. "Madison!" Derek's voice was raw with panic as he ran toward the railing where she had gone over. "Someone get a life preserver." Sophia was already moving, her maternal instincts and basic human decency overriding any complicated feelings about Madison's role in her marriage. She rushed down the stairs from the upper deck, pushing through the crowd of frozen guests, but as she reached the main deck, another massive wave slammed into the yacht. This one was different, more powerful, and Sophia realized with growing terror that the storm system was intensifying faster than anyone had anticipated. The impact sent her staggering sideways, directly toward the portside railing. Her hands shot out, desperately seeking something solid to grab, but her fingers found only air. For one crystalline moment, Sophia Martinez Blackwood, 2.3 million Instagram followers, successful entrepreneur, pregnant wife, hung suspended above the churning Pacific Ocean. She could see Derek at the opposite railing, already stripping off his jacket to dive after Madison. She could see Tyler Cross shouting something she couldn't hear over the wind and waves. She could see a dozen phones recording what was about to become the most viral maritime disaster in social media history. Then gravity claimed her, and she plunged into the cold, unforgiving sea. The impact drove all air from her lungs. The Pacific in October was shockingly cold, even close to shore, and the temperature hit her system like a physical blow. Salt water burned her throat as she instinctively gasped, and for several terrifying seconds, she couldn't tell which way was up. Her designer dress, chosen carefully for photographs and networking, became a waterlogged anchor dragging her down. The fabric wrapped around her legs, restricting movement and making it nearly impossible to kick effectively. Her shoes, elegant heels that had looked perfect with the outfit, were now deadly weights pulling her toward the ocean floor. She broke the surface once, coughing and gasping, her arms flailing desperately to stay afloat. The yacht looked impossibly far away, its lights blurring through the salt water in her eyes. She could hear shouting from the deck, but the words were lost in the wind and her own panic. "Help!" she screamed, but her voice was weak, barely audible above the sound of waves and engines. "Help me!" 20 yards away, she could see Madison Sterling thrashing in the water. Her red dress spread around her like spilled blood. Madison was a stronger swimmer, or perhaps her dress was less restrictive because she was managing to stay afloat more easily. But it was Madison's voice that Derek heard first. "Derek, help me. I can't swim much longer." Sophia watched her husband appear at the yacht's railing, his shirt already off, his body poised to dive. For one hopeful moment, she thought he might be looking for both of them, calculating how to attempt a double rescue. Instead, she watched him leap directly toward Madison Sterling. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that it almost stopped her from fighting to survive. Derek, the man who had promised to love and protect her, who had made vows before God and family, who was the father of the child growing inside her, had chosen to save his mistress while leaving his pregnant wife to drown. Sophia slipped under the surface again, her strength already fading. The cold was seeping into her bones, making her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Each time she fought back to the surface, it was harder than the last. But just as consciousness began to slip away, strong hands grabbed her arms. Someone was pulling her upward, fighting against the weight of her waterlogged clothes and the ocean's relentless pull. She broke the surface, gasping and choking, salt water streaming from her nose and mouth. Through her blurred vision, she could see Tyler Cross treading water beside her, his face grim with effort and determination. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Just hold on to me and don't fight." "My baby," she gasped. "I'm pregnant." Tyler's expression tightened. "Then we're getting you out of here right now." By the time they reached the yacht's swim platform, Sophia was barely conscious. Strong hands pulled her from the water, and she collapsed onto the deck, salt water streaming from her mouth and nose. Someone wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, but she was shaking too violently for it to help. Through the crowd of concerned faces, she saw Derek climbing aboard with Madison in his arms. He was breathing heavily from the exertion, his face flushed with adrenaline and something that looked disturbingly like triumph. Madison clung to him, her red dress plastered to her body, her blonde hair streaming with seawater. Derek set Madison down gently, his hands lingering on her shoulders as he checked for injuries. It was only then that his eyes found Sophia, huddled under a blanket with Tyler Cross kneeling beside her. "Sophia." He started toward her, but his concern seemed performative, obligatory. "Are you all right?" She tried to speak, but only salt water and bile came up. As the Coast Guard helicopter approached in the distance, its searchlight cutting through the darkness, Sophia closed her eyes and tried to process what had just happened. Her marriage was over. Her life, as she knew it, was over. The cramping started as they lifted her into the helicopter. The cramping had started as sharp, rhythmic pulses during the helicopter ride to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. By the time they wheeled Sophia into the emergency room, the pain had become a constant, crushing weight in her abdomen that made it impossible to think about anything else. 28 years old, approximately 8 weeks pregnant. The EMT was reporting to the triage nurse. Submersion incident, possible hypothermia. Patient is experiencing abdominal cramping and spotting. Spotting. The word hit Sophia like a physical blow. She knew what it meant, had researched every possible pregnancy complication during the excited weeks since she had discovered she was expecting. But knowing the medical terminology didn't make the reality any less devastating. They rushed her into a private room where doctors and nurses moved with efficient urgency, checking her vital signs, drawing blood, asking questions she couldn't focus enough to answer properly. The hypothermia had left her disoriented and shivering uncontrollably, despite the heated blankets they kept piling on top of her. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. We're going to take very good care of you, but I need you to focus on my questions. Can you tell me about the cramping? When did it start?" "On the helicopter." Sophia managed through chattering teeth. "It started on the helicopter." "Doctor." Chen's expression was carefully neutral, but Sophia caught the meaningful look she exchanged with the nurse. They were preparing her for bad news. "We're going to do an ultrasound right now to check on the baby. Just try to stay calm." But staying calm was impossible. As the technician moved the ultrasound wand across her still flat stomach, Sophia stared at the screen, desperately searching for the familiar flickering that would indicate a heartbeat. The room was too quiet, the medical staff too still. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Blackwood." "Doctor," Chen said finally, "there's no fetal heartbeat. The trauma from the submersion and hypothermia has resulted in fetal demise." Fetal demise. Clinical language for the death of her child. The future she had been planning. The family she had wanted to build. Sophia closed her eyes and felt something inside her chest crack and collapse. Tyler Cross's voice came from the doorway. "Can you explain what that means in practical terms, Doctor?" Chen looked between them, clearly assuming Tyler was Sophia's husband. "The pregnancy has ended, Mrs. Blackwood will need a procedure to prevent infection, but physically, she should recover fully." "And emotionally," Tyler pressed. "That's different for everyone. We have counselors who specialize in pregnancy loss." Sophia barely heard the rest of the conversation. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, now empty of the life that had been growing there just hours ago. The Instagram announcement that morning felt like it had happened in another lifetime, to another person. "Where is my husband?" she whispered. "Doctor." Chen consulted her chart. "Derek Blackwood. He's in the waiting room." "Would you like us to bring him in?" 5 minutes later. Derek entered the room with Madison Sterling close behind him. Both had changed into dry clothes, though Derek's hair was still damp from his ocean rescue. Madison looked pale, but otherwise unharmed, and she was wearing Derek's jacket over what appeared to be hospital scrubs. "Sophia, thank God you're all right," Derek said, moving toward her bed. But his relief seemed hollow, performed for the benefit of the medical staff. "I lost the baby," she said quietly, watching his face for a reaction. Derek stopped walking. For just a moment, his composure slipped, and she saw something that might have been genuine grief, but it was gone so quickly she couldn't be sure. "I'm sorry," he said finally. That's terrible news." The doctor said it was caused by the trauma, the cold water, the stress, the fear. She kept her voice steady, clinical. "If you had pulled me out first, the baby might have survived." The room went completely silent. Madison stepped closer to Derek, her hand finding his arm in a gesture that was both supportive and possessive. "Doctor." Chen looked between the three of them, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. "Mr. Blackwood." "Doctor," Chen said carefully, "your wife has been through a severe trauma. She's going to need a lot of support during recovery." "Of course," Derek replied automatically. "Whatever she needs." But he was looking at Madison when he said it, not at Sophia. "Doctor." Chen explained the medical procedure that would be necessary, the recovery time, the follow-up appointments. Through it all. Derek stood at the foot of the hospital bed, his expression carefully controlled. Madison remained at his side, her presence a constant reminder of the choice he had made. When the doctor finished, Derek cleared his throat. "What about the press? There were a lot of phones on that yacht. Videos. Photos." Sophia stared at him. Their child was dead. She was lying in a hospital bed having lost everything that mattered to her, and he was worried about public relations. "I don't care about the press," she said. "Well, you should. This could destroy both our careers if it's not handled properly. The narrative needs to be controlled." Tyler Cross spoke up from his corner chair. "What narrative? The one where you chose to save your mistress instead of your pregnant wife?" Derek's jaw tightened. "I don't know who you are, but this is a private family matter." Tyler Cross, LA Times. And actually, It stopped being private the moment it happened on a yacht full of people with cameras. You're a reporter, Derek's voice sharpened. Are you planning to write about this? Tyler shrugged. That depends on what happens next. Derek moved closer to the bed, his voice dropping to what Sophia recognized as his intimidation tone. This was a terrible accident. 2 people fell into the water, and I made a split-second decision to save the person I could reach first. End of story. Interesting version of events, Tyler said mildly. Especially since I have video evidence of you diving directly toward Madison while Sophia was calling for help from the opposite direction. The color drained from Derek's face. You recorded it. I didn't have to. Half the yacht was filming. The footage is already circulating on social media. #SaveYourWife is trending on Twitter. As the door closed behind Derek and Madison, Sophia pressed her hand to her stomach, to the emptiness that remained. Her body shook, but not with weakness. With the first tremors of something fierce awakening inside her. The woman who once gave up her spotlight for love was gone. The woman who drowned was gone. What would rise in her place would not be silent. Amanda Chen arrived at the hospital at 3 a.m, her lawyer instincts in full gear despite being woken by Sophia's devastating phone call. She found her best friend sitting up in the hospital bed, no longer shivering from hypothermia, but trembling with a different kind of shock. Tell me everything, Amanda said, pulling a chair close to the bed. She had stopped at home long enough to grab her laptop and a voice recorder, knowing that the next few hours would be crucial for whatever came next. Sophia recounted the evening's events in a flat, emotionless tone that scared Amanda more than tears would have. The yacht party, the confrontation with Derek, the fall into the Pacific, watching her husband choose to save Madison while she nearly drowned, and finally, the loss of the baby that had been the bright spot in her increasingly dark marriage. Derek and Madison left about an hour ago, Sophia concluded. They said they needed to handle the press situation, but I think they just couldn't stand to be here anymore. Too much guilt or too much inconvenience. Amanda was taking notes, her legal mind already formulating strategy. Did Derek say anything about the business about your shared assets? Nothing specific, but Amanda, I think this was planned. What do you mean planned? Sophia reached for the bedside table where Tyler Cross had left his business card before heading home to write his story. Tyler showed me something earlier. Madison Sterling has worked for 3 different tech companies in the past 2 years. In each case, the CEO's wife died or disappeared, and Madison ended up with significant financial benefits. Amanda's pen stopped moving. What kind of deaths? Boating accident, car crash, skiing incident, all ruled accidental, but all involving wives who were starting to ask questions about their husbands' business practices. Amanda opened her laptop and started typing. I'm going to run deep background checks on both of them, financial records, insurance policies, business partnerships, everything. While Amanda worked, Sophia stared out the hospital window at the Los Angeles skyline. Dawn was still hours away, but she felt like she was already living in a different world than the one she had woken up in yesterday morning. Sophia, you need to see this, Amanda said, turning her laptop screen around. I accessed Derek's business filings through the California Secretary of State database. 3 weeks ago, he transferred 60% of ConnectCore's assets to a shell company called Sterling Enterprises. Sterling, like Madison Sterling. It gets worse. He also changed the beneficiary on his life insurance policy. If anything happens to Derek, Madison inherits everything. And if anything happens to you, your share of the marital assets defaults to him instead of going to your family. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. When did he change my beneficiary status? Amanda's fingers flew across the keyboard. 2 days ago, right after you told him you wanted to review the business contracts. The implications hit Sophia like a physical blow. Derek hadn't just been having an affair. He had been systematically erasing her from their shared financial life, setting up a structure where her death would benefit him enormously. There's more. Amanda continued grimly. I found the maritime rescue charity donations that Tyler mentioned, $2.3 million in the past 6 months, to something called Pacific Safety Foundation. But when I search for that organization, it barely exists, just a P.O. box and a single-page website. What does that mean? It means Derek has been moving money out of ConnectCore and into accounts that he controls completely. If the company goes public like he's been planning, those assets would be worth 50 times what he paid for them. Sophia leaned back against her pillow, overwhelmed by the scope of her husband's deception. So tonight wasn't just about choosing Madison over me. It was about removing me from the equation entirely. I think so. And I think if Tyler Cross hadn't been there to pull you out of the water, you would have drowned while Derek heroically but unsuccessfully tried to save both women. The hospital room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in as Sophia realized how close she had come to being another convenient accident in Madison Sterling's wake of destruction. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Derek's name appeared on the screen, and Amanda leaned over to read it with her. Just spoke with lawyers. For both our sakes, it's important that we control the narrative about tonight. The press is making this sound worse than it was. Let's meet tomorrow to discuss our options. I love you. Amanda snorted. I love you. But first, let me check with my attorneys about how to spin your near-death experience. Should I respond? Absolutely not. In fact, you should turn your phone off entirely. Let them think you're too traumatized to function. Meanwhile, I'm going to get court orders freezing all your shared assets. Sophia nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to the bigger picture. Derek and Madison thought they had neutralized her, thought the grieving wife would retreat into privacy while they controlled the damage. They were wrong. Amanda, I want to do something that might sound crazy. I'm listening. I want to go public, not just with the affair, but with everything. The financial manipulation, the pattern of convenient accidents around Madison, all of it. Amanda looked skeptical. That's incredibly risky. If you're wrong about any part of this, Derek could sue you for defamation, and you're still dealing with the trauma of losing the baby. I'm not wrong, and the trauma is exactly why I need to act now, while I'm still angry enough to fight. Sophia reached for her phone and opened her Instagram app. 2.3 million followers were waiting for an update on her pregnancy announcement from yesterday. Instead, they were about to get the story of their lives. What are you doing? Amanda asked nervously. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. Derek thinks he can control the narrative because he controls the business media and the tech press. But I control something more powerful. Which is, Sophia held up her phone. The Instagram camera already open. I control the audience that actually matters. Women who've been lied to, betrayed, gaslit, and erased by the men they trusted. Women who know exactly what it feels like to be thrown overboard while their husbands save someone else. Sophia, if you're going to do this, you need to be very, very careful about what you say. One mistake, and Derek's lawyers will destroy you. Then help me get it right, because I'm done being careful, and I'm done being quiet. Amanda stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do this smart. We document everything. We stick to facts we can prove, and we make sure every single word is legally defensible. Sophia positioned the phone camera to frame her face against the hospital pillow. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hair was still damp from salt water, and she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had lost everything in a single night. It was the most authentic content she had ever created. "Ready?" she asked Amanda. "Ready." Sophia pressed record and began to speak. The video would go viral within an hour of posting. The Instagram video exploded across social media like wildfire, gaining 1 million views in the first hour and 10 million by dawn. #SaveYourWife evolved into #SophiaStrong, and suddenly everyone with a smartphone was weighing in on the yacht disaster that had become America's most talked about scandal. Sophia watched the numbers climb from her hospital bed, Amanda beside her fielding calls from reporters, lawyers, and brand partners. The story had legs in a way that neither of them had anticipated, tapping into cultural tensions about marriage, infidelity, and women's worth that resonated far beyond typical celebrity drama. "CNN wants an exclusive interview," Amanda reported, scrolling through messages on her phone. "So do Ellen, Good Morning America, and 60 Minutes. Your DMs are completely flooded." But Sophia was reading the comments on her video. Thousands upon thousands of women sharing their own stories of betrayal and abandonment. The response was overwhelming, heartbreaking, and oddly healing. "This is bigger than just Derek and Madison," she realized. "This story is touching something that runs much deeper." Tyler Cross arrived at 9 a.m. with coffee and the morning newspapers. His article in the LA Times had been picked up by major outlets nationwide, and the headline on USA Today read, "Tech billionaire's wife tells all how I nearly died while my husband saved his mistress." The business press is starting to ask hard questions about ConnectCore's finances. Tyler reported, "Your video didn't just expose Derek's personal behavior. It's making investors nervous about what else he might be hiding." As if summoned by their conversation, Derek appeared in the doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his designer clothes wrinkled. Madison was not with him, which Sophia found interesting. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Privately." Amanda stood up. "Anything you say to my client can be said in front of her attorney." Derek's jaw tightened. "This isn't a legal matter yet. This is still between my wife and me." "Your wife who nearly drowned while you were busy rescuing your mistress?" Tyler asked mildly. "That wife. You need to leave." Derek snapped, "Both of you. This is a private conversation." But Sophia shook her head. "No more private conversations. Derek, no more secrets. No more lies. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of witnesses." Derek moved closer to the bed, his voice dropping to the intimate tone he had always used to manipulate her during arguments. "Sophia, I know you're hurting. I know you're angry. But that video you posted is destroying everything we built together. Everything you built. I just provided the window dressing. That's not fair. We were partners. Partners don't transfer 60% of shared assets to shell companies without telling their spouses." Amanda interjected, consulting her notes. "Partners don't change insurance beneficiaries to benefit their mistresses." Derek's composure cracked slightly. "How do you know about that?" "Because I'm very good at my job." Amanda replied smoothly, "And because you left a paper trail that a first-year law student could follow." Tyler was typing notes on his phone, capturing every word. Derek noticed, and his expression hardened. "If you publish any of this conversation, I'll sue you into bankruptcy." "For reporting the truth," Tyler smiled. "Good luck with that. Especially since I have video footage of you choosing to save Madison while Sophia was calling for help from the opposite direction." "I was closer to Madison. It was a split-second decision." Bullshit, Sophia said quietly. You were closer to me. I was right below where you were standing when I fell. You had to swim past me to get to Madison. The room fell silent. Derek's face cycled through several expressions before settling on something Sophia had never seen before: genuine fear. Derek pulled out his phone and showed them the screen. ConnectCore's stock is down 30% in pre-market trading. Our biggest investor just pulled out. The board is calling an emergency meeting. And Sophia asked, and this affects you too. Half of that company is yours. If ConnectCore collapses, you lose everything. It was a threat disguised as concern, and they all recognized it. Derek was essentially saying that Sophia's quest for truth would destroy her own financial security. Interesting logic, Tyler observed. Destroy the evidence of your crimes or we'll both go down together. What crimes? Derek demanded. Having an affair isn't illegal. Amanda smiled coldly. Financial fraud is. So is attempted murder. Attempted murder. Derek's voice rose. That's insane. It was an accident. Was it because from where I sit, it looks like you and Madison engineered a situation where your pregnant wife would conveniently disappear, leaving you free to marry your mistress and inherit all the marital assets? Derek stared at her. You can't possibly believe that. I believe in patterns, Amanda replied, and Madison Sterling has a very interesting pattern of being present when the wives of wealthy men meet untimely ends. Tyler looked up from his phone. Actually, the FBI is now looking into Madison's employment history. Turns out 3 suspicious deaths in 2 years is enough to trigger a federal investigation. Derek's face went white. The FBI. Your story has attracted some very serious attention, Tyler continued. Not just from the media, but from law enforcement agencies that specialize in financial crimes and suspicious deaths. Sophia watched her husband process this information, saw the exact moment he realized that his carefully constructed world was collapsing beyond repair. For 3 years, Derek had controlled every aspect of their relationship through manipulation, gaslighting, and financial leverage. Now, suddenly, he was the one without power. What do you want? He asked finally. I want the truth, Sophia replied. All of it. On camera. On the record. With no lawyers coaching your answers. Derek looked around the hospital room at the 3 people who now controlled his fate. He slumped into the visitor's chair, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked genuinely defeated. Madison was supposed to be temporary, he said quietly. Just a way to modernize ConnectCore's brand strategy. But she had other plans. What kind of plans? Tyler asked, his phone already recording. Derek looked at Sophia one last time, as if asking for permission to destroy what remained of their marriage. When she nodded, he began to tell the story that would dominate news cycles for months to come. Derek's confession unfolded like a masterclass in psychological manipulation and corporate fraud, recorded on Tyler's phone for posterity. What emerged was a story far more complex and disturbing than anyone in the hospital room had imagined. Madison approached ConnectCore 6 months ago. Derek began, his voice barely above a whisper. She said she specialized in helping tech companies transition into lifestyle markets. Her pitch was incredible, professional, exactly what we needed. He paused, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Sophia noticed that he was no longer wearing his wedding ring, though she couldn't remember when he had removed it. But it wasn't really about business, was it? Amanda prompted. Not entirely. Madison understood that tech companies were vulnerable to social media campaigns, cancel culture, reputation management. She positioned herself as someone who could navigate those waters. Tyler looked up from his phone. And her method was seducing married CEOs. Derek flinched. She studied the targets, learned their weaknesses, their insecurities, their marital problems. With me, she focused on the fact that Sophia's influencer career made me feel irrelevant in my own relationship. Sophia felt a stab of recognition. Derek had always been subtly critical of her social media success, dismissing it as not real business, while simultaneously benefiting from her income and connections. Madison convinced me that Sophia was holding me back. Derek continued that a man building a billion-dollar company needed a partner who understood the stakes, who could operate at that level. "And you believed her?" Sophia asked. Derek looked at her with something that might have been shame. "She made me feel powerful in a way I hadn't felt in years. When we were together, I wasn't just the guy married to a famous influencer. I was Derek Blackwood, tech visionary." "So you started the affair," Amanda said matter-of-factly. It wasn't supposed to become serious. Madison was clear that she was focused on her career, not looking for commitment. Perfect for what I needed. Tyler stopped recording. "What you needed was to cheat on your pregnant wife." Derek's defensiveness flared briefly, then collapsed. "I needed to feel like myself again. The version of myself that built Connect Core from nothing, that took risks and won big. Sophia's world of Instagram posts and brand partnerships made me feel small." "When did the financial manipulation start?" Amanda asked. "About 3 months ago. Madison said I needed to protect my assets in case Sophia ever filed for divorce. She helped me set up the shell companies, the offshore transfers, the insurance changes." "And you didn't think that was suspicious?" Derek was quiet for a long moment. "I thought it was smart business. Madison understood high-stakes financial strategy in a way that Sophia never could. Because I was never allowed to understand it." Sophia interjected. "Every time I asked about our finances, you told me not to worry about the complicated stuff. Because I was protecting you. You were controlling me. There's a difference." Tyler resumed recording. "Tell us about last night. What was the plan?" Derek's hands were shaking now. "There was no plan, not like you're suggesting. But Madison knew you were going to choose her if something happened." Amanda pressed. "That was never in doubt, was it?" Derek looked out the hospital window, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Madison had been preparing me, planting ideas about how Sophia was becoming a liability, how her emotional volatility, especially with the pregnancy hormones, was making her unpredictable." Sophia's chest tightened. "Emotional volatility. Madison said you were becoming paranoid, jealous, potentially dangerous to my reputation. She suggested that if something ever happened to you, it would actually be a relief." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. While she had been celebrating her pregnancy and planning their future as a family, Madison had been systematically poisoning her husband's mind against her. "So when we both fell into the water," Sophia said slowly, "you had already decided who was worth saving." Derek finally looked at her, tears in his eyes. "I didn't consciously decide anything. It was instinct. But Madison had trained my instincts to prioritize her over you." Tyler leaned forward. "What about the other women, Madison's previous employers?" "What other women?" Amanda opened her laptop and showed Derek the research she had compiled. 3 companies, 3 CEOs, 3 wives who had died in convenient accidents shortly after Madison Sterling had been hired as a consultant. Derek's face went gray as he read. "I didn't know about this. Madison never mentioned previous clients." "Did you ever wonder why a consultant with Madison's credentials was available to work with Connect Core?" Tyler asked. "Why she wasn't already employed by a major firm?" "She said she preferred working independently, selecting clients who shared her vision. Her vision of murdering inconvenient wives." Amanda's tone was ice cold. Derek stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "This is insane. You're talking about serial murder, not business consulting." "Are we?" Tyler pulled up news articles on his phone. Angela Morrison, wife of TechFlow CEO, died in a boating accident 8 months after Madison was hired. Insurance payout was $12 million, which the CEO used to expand the company with Madison as his new partner. Derek was reading over Tyler's shoulder, his expression growing more horrified by the moment. "Jennifer Walsh, wife of Datadyne's founder, died in a car accident 6 months after Madison joined as head of brand strategy. The husband married Madison 3 weeks later." "And Sarah Kim," Amanda added. "Wife of CloudTech's CEO. Skiing accident in Aspen. Madison was on the same mountain, coincidentally." Derek slumped against the window. "Oh my God. What have I done?" "You've been played by a professional," Tyler said bluntly. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Sophia watched her husband process the magnitude of his situation. He had thought he was having an affair. Instead, he had been recruited as an accessory to what appeared to be a pattern of serial murder. "Where is Madison now?" Amanda asked. Derek pulled out his phone with shaking hands. "She said she was handling press inquiries from her apartment, but she's not answering my calls." Tyler and Amanda exchanged looks. "Derek, I need you to listen very carefully," Tyler said. "If Madison follows her established pattern, you're now a liability. You know too much, and you're no longer useful to her." "What do you mean, Amanda said grimly. "That you might be her next victim." Derek's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it, and the color drained from his face completely. "What does it say?" Sophia asked. Derek held up the phone with a trembling hand. The message was from Madison. "Pack a bag and meet me at Marina del Rey in 1 hour. We're taking my boat to Mexico. Don't tell anyone where you're going." Tyler was already dialing 911. "Derek, you're not going anywhere near that marina." But Derek was staring at the message, finally understanding the trap he had walked into. "She's going to kill me, isn't she?" "If you meet her, probably yes," Amanda confirmed. "But if you cooperate with law enforcement, you might survive this." Derek looked at Sophia, his wife of 3 years, the woman he had betrayed and nearly killed. "I'm sorry doesn't even begin to cover this, does it?" Sophia considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally, "it doesn't." But for the first time since the yacht disaster, Derek's remorse seemed genuine. And if he helped bring Madison Sterling to justice, it might be enough to keep him out of prison. The FBI would arrive within an hour, and Derek's real nightmare would begin. But Sophia's ordeal was finally ending. 6 months later, Sophia stood at the podium of the federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, facing a crowd of reporters and cameras that dwarfed even her biggest social media moments. Behind her, FBI agents escorted Madison Sterling toward a waiting transport vehicle, her hands cuffed behind her back and her perfect blonde hair no longer camera-ready. The investigation that began with Tyler Cross's yacht party video had uncovered a web of fraud, manipulation, and murder that shocked even seasoned federal investigators. Madison Sterling, whose real name was Michelle Steinberg, had been running a sophisticated con game targeting wealthy tech entrepreneurs for over 5 years. The defendant systematically identified married CEOs whose wives represented financial or social obstacles to her objectives. FBI Special Agent Carol Martinez explained to the press, she would infiltrate their companies as a consultant, initiate affairs, and then orchestrate convenient accidents that eliminated the wives while positioning herself to inherit significant assets. Derek stood 20 feet away, flanked by his own legal team and looking like he had aged 10 years in 6 months. His cooperation with federal investigators had earned him immunity from murder conspiracy charges, but he was still facing federal fraud charges that would likely result in prison time. ConnectCore had collapsed entirely, its assets seized by federal regulators. Sophia stepped to the microphone, her voice steady and clear. The woman who spoke now bore little resemblance to the frightened, betrayed wife who had nearly drowned in the Pacific Ocean. 6 months ago, I was a different person, she began. I was someone who believed that love meant silence, that loyalty meant looking the other way, that being a good wife meant making myself smaller so my husband could feel bigger. The crowd was completely silent, dozens of microphones capturing every word. The night I fell into the Pacific Ocean, I learned that the man I trusted with my life valued me less than a woman he had known for 3 months. But I also learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined possible. In the months following Derek's confession, Sophia had transformed her social media platform into something unprecedented, a combination support network, legal advocacy organization, and financial literacy resource for women escaping abusive relationships. The Carter Foundation, named for her maiden name, had already helped hundreds of women identify financial manipulation and safely extract themselves from dangerous marriages. Madison Sterling preyed on women like me, Sophia continued. Women who had been taught to trust completely, to ask few questions, to prioritize their husband's comfort over their own safety. She counted on our silence, our compliance, our willingness to be erased. Tyler Cross was in the front row, his investigation having won a Pulitzer Prize for public service journalism. His continued reporting had helped federal investigators connect Madison to at least 7 suspicious deaths across 4 states, turning a celebrity scandal into one of the largest serial murder cases in decades. But we are not silent anymore, Sophia said, her voice growing stronger. We are not compliant, and we will not be erased. After the press conference, Sophia drove alone to a small cemetery in Pasadena, where she had bought a memorial stone for the child she lost. The marble marker was simple, engraved with the words "Baby Blackwood, loved and remembered." She knelt beside the stone and placed fresh flowers, as she did every month. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer defined her entire existence. Madison Sterling will spend the rest of her life in prison, she said quietly to the stone. Derek will probably spend 5 to 10 years in federal prison, maybe less with good behavior. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure this doesn't happen to other women. A year earlier, Sophia would have defined herself entirely in relation to Derek. She was Derek's wife, Derek's partner, Derek's support system. Now she was Sophia Carter, CEO of a multi-million-dollar foundation, author of a best-selling memoir, and advocate for women's financial independence. The Instagram account that had started as lifestyle content now reached 15 million followers with posts about recognizing financial abuse, documenting suspicious behavior, and building support networks. Major corporations partnered with the Carter Foundation to provide financial literacy training and emergency resources for women in crisis. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tyler Cross. "Dinner tonight. I have news about the Seattle investigation." Sophia smiled, typing back, "Pick me up at 7. She and Tyler had become close during the months of legal proceedings, their professional relationship evolving into something deeper. He understood her need for independence, her wariness of financial entanglement, her determination to never again be defined by someone else's ambitions. As Sophia drove home to her new apartment in Santa Monica, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this point. The woman who had fallen into the Pacific Ocean had been desperate to save a marriage that was already over. The woman who emerged had learned that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let everything else sink. Her phone rang with a call from Amanda. The book sales numbers are in. Amanda reported, Drowning in Lies hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Sophia pulled over to absorb the news. Her memoir, written during the federal investigation, had become a cultural phenomenon, sparking conversations about coercive control, financial abuse, and the subtle ways that women were trained to disappear themselves in relationships. There's more. Amanda continued. Netflix wants to option the story for a limited series, and 3 major publishers are bidding on your next book. For the first time in her adult life, she had the luxury of choosing her own story. 2 years after the yacht incident that changed everything, Sophia Carter stood on the deck of a very different vessel. This one was a Coast Guard cutter stationed off the California coast, and she was there as the keynote speaker for National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The irony was not lost on her. The woman who had nearly drowned while her husband saved his mistress was now helping to rescue other women from the depths of abusive relationships. When I fell into the Pacific Ocean that night, she told the assembled crowd of Coast Guard personnel, federal agents, and domestic violence advocates, I thought I was dying, but what was actually dying was the version of myself that had been trained to accept betrayal as love, manipulation as protection, and silence as loyalty. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez introduced the statistics that had driven this partnership between the Carter Foundation and federal maritime agencies. Domestic violence often escalated near large bodies of water, where abusers felt they could dispose of evidence more easily. The Coast Guard was now trained to recognize signs of domestic abuse during routine rescues and investigations. After the ceremony, Sophia walked to the ship's railing and looked out at the Pacific. The ocean that had once terrified her now felt like an old friend. She had learned to see it not as the place where she almost died, but as the place where she chose to live. Tyler Cross joined her at the railing, as she had known he would. They had been together for 18 months now, building a relationship based on mutual respect, complete financial transparency, and the understanding that Sophia would never again diminish herself for someone else's comfort. The investigation in Seattle closed today, Tyler reported. Madison's been connected to 2 more deaths. The prosecutors think she killed at least 9 women over 6 years. Sophia nodded. The number kept growing as investigators traced Madison's movements across the country. Each new victim discovered was both heartbreaking and validating, proof that Sophia's survival had prevented other women from dying. What about Derek? Sentenced to 7 years federal prison, eligible for parole in 5. He'll be in minimum security, probably out in 3 with good behavior. Sophia felt nothing at this news. Derek Blackwood had become irrelevant to her life, a cautionary tale she sometimes shared with other women, but no longer a source of active emotion. Amanda's been working on something interesting, Tyler continued. Legislation that would require disclosure of all beneficial ownership in shell companies used by married couples. They're calling it the Sophia Carter Financial Transparency Act. This news did spark emotion. The idea that her nightmare might result in legal protections for other women felt like the most meaningful legacy imaginable. Sophia's phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. 17 million followers now received her daily posts about financial independence, recognizing manipulation, and building supportive communities. The engagement was consistently higher than anything she had achieved during her lifestyle influencer days. I have something to tell you, Tyler said, his voice carrying a note she hadn't heard before. The Washington Post offered me a job, investigative editor, based in D.C. It's exactly what I've been working toward my entire career. Sophia felt her chest tighten, but not with the panic she might have experienced 2 years ago. Instead, she felt proud of Tyler and curious about what this meant for them. That's incredible, Tyler. You should absolutely take it. I was hoping you'd consider coming with me. The offer hung in the salt air between them. The woman she had become asked different questions about partnership and independence. What would that look like for the foundation for my work here? DC is actually perfect for advocacy work. You'd be closer to congressional hearings, federal agencies, policymakers. The foundation could have much more impact from there. Sophia considered this. Tyler wasn't asking her to sacrifice her career for his. He was suggesting a partnership where both their professional goals could flourish. I'd want to keep my own place, she said. At least initially. Tyler smiled. I wouldn't expect anything else. And complete financial independence. Separate accounts, separate investments, separate credit. Obviously. And if we ever get married, I want a prenup that would make Amanda proud. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Sophia looked out at the Pacific one more time, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The woman who had fallen into this ocean had been desperate to save a marriage that was killing her. The woman standing here now was choosing partnership on her own terms. All right, she said. Let's go to Washington. Tyler pulled her close, and for the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to imagine a future built on trust instead of fear. But even as she kissed him, part of her attention remained focused on the horizon, watching for storms that might require her to save herself again. Because the most important lesson she had learned wasn't about recognizing manipulation or building financial independence or even finding love again. It was that she could survive anything. The woman who had nearly drowned while her husband chose someone else had discovered that she was strong enough to save herself. And once you learn that about yourself, you never forget it. As the Coast Guard cutter headed back to shore, Sophia opened her phone and began typing her daily Instagram post. Beautiful souls, today I want to talk about the difference between surviving and thriving. For a long time, I thought they were the same thing. But survival is just the first step. Thriving is what happens when you realize that you're not just strong enough to get through the storm, you're powerful enough to navigate by your own stars. The post would receive 2 million likes within an hour. But more importantly, it would reach women who needed to hear that they could save themselves, that they were worth saving, and that sometimes the best revenge is not just living, but living spectacularly well. Sophia Carter had learned to breathe underwater. Now she was teaching others to swim.